In this example, we're going to create a Java class that can represent a 4-color pen. So if you haven't seen one of those before, it's a pen that has 4 different colors that you can select. There's 4 different places to press. Depending on which color you select, that's the color that will extend once it's open. You can also have another state, which would be nothing selected, in which case the pen is closed. And notice, when you buy one of these pens, it's closed. So our constructor is not going to set a color. We need to have a state that says there's no color selected. So there's lots of different ways to represent the possible colors we can have, but one way I like to do it is to create an array. I only need one copy of this array, and I'm never going to change it once an object is instantiated. So I'm going to have a private final static so that there's only one copy string, and that's going to be an array of colors. And my colors are going to be none. And then I would list each color, or have one string for each color that's a possibility. So we'll do black, blue, green, and red. I'm going to have a private member called color. That'll be an int, and that int will be an index into this array. So the valid values here will be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 for color, but that color will map into one of these. So for my constructor, as you remember, when we get a new pen, it's going to be closed. So for our constructor, we're going to represent that. So we have a 4-color pen. It doesn't take any parameters because the client here doesn't get an opportunity to select. We'll call the super constructor, and then we'll say color is equal to 0. So we don't actually need a toString here, but for debugging purposes, it's helpful to handle one. So let's generate the toString, and this will just tell us what that color is. Now notice here, we're saying color is equal to something. We don't want to actually print this integer. That's not really helpful. We want to print what's at that index in the array. So now let's create a driver class. And again, as a reminder, there's nothing special about a driver. You don't have to have a driver with every class you write. The point of a driver is to let us test our class. So we're going to create a main method. We'll instantiate a 4-color pen. We'll call it myPen. We instantiate an object with the new keyword. And then let's just go ahead and just print this. And if we just use the variable as a string, then the toString method will get called by default. So let's run this, and you see the color is none. So now we need a way to change the color. Now you may think, well, we only have one data member, and that's an integer, so we'll just take an integer. But you really don't want the user to have to think about what integer goes to which color. You really just want them to be able to say, click on the green or whatever. So we're going to have a function called click, and that's going to take a string. Based on what string they pass in, we're going to set color to that index. Again, when they pass this string, what we want to find is the index of the string in this array. Now, there's some more advanced ways to do that. In fact, when we talk about lists and so forth, we'll see some really convenient ways that we can find this. But let's go ahead and just write a helper function for now. So while in theory we don't need this if we use all the advanced features of Java, it's always good to keep in the back of your mind that when you need some task performed in a program, well, you're a programmer. You can write a function to do whatever it is you need to have done. So in this case, I'm going to write a function called getColorIndex. And notice it's private because nobody cares about this. That'll only be used inside here. And I'm going to take a string C. I'm going to go through the entire colors array using the length attribute of the array. Notice I'm going to do C to uppercase, meaning I want to uppercase all their letters because notice these are all in uppercase. So whatever string they pass, if they pass in weird capitalization, that's going to be fine. As long as they spell the name of the color correctly, this will work. And then I'm going to compare that, and I'm going to use equals. Because remember, if I just use the double equal sign equality check, it's going to say, is this the same object? And I'm going to compare that with colors of II. And if that's the case, I'm going to return that index. And I need to make sure that this allows an integer return value. And if this fails to find something, I'm going to return 0. We're going to set it to none. So if you try to set the pen to purple, well, it's just going to set it to none. We can handle this in multiple different ways. We could say, well, if you try to click the purple button, that doesn't make sense because there is no purple button here. And you can't see it in this picture, but rest assured there's a green and blue on the back side of this pin. So what if they try to click the purple button? Well, that's nonsensical. You could just say, we'll leave it alone. In that case, you could just return whatever color already is. The color doesn't change. But in this case, we're going to say, look, if you try to do something that doesn't make sense, we're going to close the pin so you can't do any further damage. So now, when they call this click function, I can say that color is equal to get color index of whatever color string they pass in. Now, you may say, well, why didn't I just say color is equal to II and then color equals 0, and then I don't need this helper function? Well, this has some other potential uses. Anytime we want to go from a string to that index, we can use this. That's why I'll create that separate helper function that we can use in the future if there's some need for it that arises. What's the other thing you're going to do with a pin? Well, you're going to write with it. What we're going to do for write is we're going to take a message, or a string, I should say, and we're going to call that string message. And if the color is not equal to 0, then we're going to print. We can think about how we want to do this. How about if we just create some tags? Then we'll print the message, and then we're going to print those tags out again. Now, if the color is 0, we're not going to print anything out because the pin's closed. Now, you may say, how do we know that colors is 0? And I think that's a reasonable point. So how about if the colors is not equal to get color index of none? And that way, if we add or remove, none will always indicate that that's not a value. Okay, so let's see if this works. We're printing out the pin, and now let's click and we'll set it to blue. Notice this is all lowercase. We're going to check to see that that works. And then we're going to my pin will write hello. And let's do it again. We'll do green and we'll print the end, or we'll write the end. So let's see if this works. And you can see it performs the way we would expect. So let's create a second pin. We'll call it pin 2. And after we instantiate these, here's our 2 pins. So then we're going to, we'll use pin 2 to print the goodbye message here. And then we'll run it. So notice it looks like that's all good. And let's copy these lines as well. And then we'll say once we're done, just to make sure that that works in all the cases. And that looks good. Although I think we need our print line, our extra line there, just to make things clearer. Okay, so you can see when we started off, both of them have a color of none. Then we print some words, we have these nice tags, and we have at the end, notice that their status has been changed. So let's suppose that we want to print a red goodbye with my pin, and that did not work. So notice my pin for color went to none. Now we did test something. If it's set to none, nothing prints, but we have this weird character here. Now our goodbye prints. So I actually wanted to test it eventually, we didn't do it yet, to see that when the color was none, nothing would print. So let me go ahead and add a test case for that at the beginning of the driver. So we shouldn't see this output at all. We should just see the blue, green, and red things that we're printing here. And let's run this to test it. Yep, and that looks good. We don't write anything when the color is none. That's after we instantiate the objects. Then we print 3 messages in different colors. It looks like our click function works. And then here we print the end. So all of that looks good. And there's a couple things that we could add or remove from this and fix. So one thing we could do is say, we could write a function called getColorTag that would kind of clean this up, but I'm not really sure how often we would use that other than with this write. So I think what we have here is sufficient for now. I think hopefully this gives you an idea of how to design and write a class. that's something we're going to do multiple times.